Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we are conducting a full corporate autopsy on one of the most spectacular and, honestly, rapid business collapses in human history. We're talking about the fall of Nokia. We are going to unpack exactly how a true titan of industry was completely decimated in the software competition. And spoiler alert, it wasn't necessarily because they lacked the technology. No, they were paralyzed by a deeply toxic culture that fundamentally feared failure. It is a fascinating and, quite frankly, terrifying lesson for any business today, so let's get into it. To really grasp the sheer magnitude of this collapse, we have to rewind to the early 2000s. Back then, Nokia didn't just participate in the mobile phone market, right? They essentially were the market. They held a staggering 40% of the global market share. I mean, just pause and think about that level of dominance. They were absolutely untouchable, a Finnish giant that had literally conquered the globe. And absolutely nothing showcases that invincibility quite like this. Over 250 million units sold. We're talking about the Nokia 1100. A phone that you or maybe your parents almost certainly owned. It wasn't just a popular phone. It became the best-selling electrical device in all of human history. They were cranking out these indestructible little bricks with batteries that seemed to last for days, making communication accessible to the entire world. But here is where the story takes a wild turn. At their absolute peak in the year 2000, Nokia was valued at over $250 billion. Fast forward just a little over a decade to 2013, and this absolute behemoth sold its core mobile phone business to Microsoft for just $7.2 billion. Actually, scratch that. Calling it pocket change in the tech world is an understatement. So the big mystery here is, how on earth did a $250 billion empire crumble so quickly? Section 1. The invincible king of mobile phones. Nokia actually started as a simple paper mill way back in 1865, but by 1998, their breakneck innovation had transformed them into the Apple of Europe. Section 2. Blindness to the software revolution. Everything shifted in 2007 when Steve Jobs unveiled the very first iPhone. And how did Nokia's executives react? They arrogantly laughed it off. They called it a fragile toy with a weak battery. That arrogance perfectly highlights a massive strategic failure. A massive paradigm shift was happening right under their noses. The threat of new entry into the market was incredibly strong. New players, namely Apple and later Google with Android, were completely rewriting the rules of the entire industry. But Nokia's management? They were sitting so comfortably at the top that they were entirely oblivious to the existential threat knocking right at their front door. You see, Nokia suffered from a fundamental misunderstanding of what the market actually wanted moving forward. They were still completely obsessed with the hardware, passing physical drop tests, extending battery life, but they totally missed the memo that Apple and Google were turning mobile phones into software-driven pocket computers. The battle wasn't about who had the toughest plastic anymore. It was entirely about who had the best software and the most vibrant app ecosystem. Section 3. A toxic culture of fear of failure. This is the true root cause of Nokia's demise. It wasn't just a technological lag. It was a deep psychological breakdown within management itself. Just listen to this devastating quote from former Nokia engineers. Nokia was the emperor with new clothes, but nobody dared to say it out loud. The entire company was living in a massive collective delusion. Everyone on the ground, the developers, the engineers, they knew the ship was sinking. They knew their software was hopelessly outgunned. But the internal environment was so stifling that they all just smiled and pretended everything was perfectly fine. A really fascinating study by INSEAD Business School later revealed exactly how this played out. They described it as a manic fear of failure. Middle managers were so terrified of losing their jobs, or even just falling out of favor, that they systematically hid bad news. When top executives asked about software schedules, middle managers just straight up lied. They painted this rosy picture, claiming new software was almost ready, when in reality, it was months, sometimes years behind schedule. Innovation literally died in silence because people were too scared to speak up. Section 4. The illusion of operating system greatness. This toxic culture directly caused a technological disaster for their software. The disparity in software was just staggering. Nokia was relying on an operating system called Symbian. It was a closed, deeply complex nightmare where adding just one new feature required patching up decade-old code. One of their own engineers famously compared it to paving a swamp. Meanwhile, iOS and Android were building these open, flexible, sleek highways focused entirely on growing a rich app ecosystem. Apple and Google were zooming ahead while Nokia was stuck sinking in the mud, all because no one had the psychological safety to admit that Symbian was a dead end. So it begs the question, what do you do when the ship starts sinking and the water is literally up to your neck? By 2010, Nokia's profits were evaporating, their market share was plunging, and they finally woke up to the absolute state of emergency. Enter Stephen Elop, an outsider brought in from Microsoft to take over as the new CEO. Section 5, the failed leap of desperation. Elop looked around, realized the company was in total denial, and made a drastic move. In 2011, Elop did something completely unprecedented. He sent a company-wide memo to all 60,000 employees, which became famously known as the burning platform. He bluntly told them a story about a man standing on a burning oil rig in the middle of the North Sea. To survive, the man had to jump off the platform and plunge into the freezing, dark, uncertain waters below. He told his employees point blank that Nokia was that burning platform. They were pouring gasoline on their own fire, and they had to jump immediately. The sheer speed of this collapse is wild when you look at it chronologically. iPhone launches in 2007, Android enters in 2008, and things spiral out of control fast. Elop takes over in 2010, sends his burning platform memo in 2011, and immediately makes a massive all-or-nothing gamble. He completely scrapped Nokia's in-house software and partnered exclusively with Microsoft to use the Windows Phone operating system. It was their bold jump into the freezing waters. But sadly, by 2013, the gamble had definitively failed, leading to the rapid sale of the company to Microsoft. The problem was, by betting everything on Windows Phone, Nokia stepped right into a fatal trap. You see, by this time, apps were the lifeblood of smartphones, but the Windows Phone platform only held about a 3% market share, compared to the massive 97% held by iOS and Android combined. App developers simply refused to waste their time building apps for a platform with basically no users, and on the flip side, users wouldn't buy a phone that didn't have basic apps like Instagram or Google Maps. It became this vicious, unbreakable cycle of no apps, no users. Nokia was still producing beautiful hardware with amazing cameras, but without that software ecosystem, it just didn't matter. Section 6, Lessons from the Fall of the King. We've done the autopsy, but what actual actionable takeaways can we pull from the ashes of this empire? While the takeaways are profound, first, success is incredibly fragile. Past dominance guarantees absolutely nothing, especially in tech. Second, hubris is deadly. Nokia's sheer arrogance blinded them to the greatest innovation of the decade. Third, and honestly I think this is the most important one, company culture matters far more than strategy. You can have all the brilliant strategists and patents in the world, but if your middle managers are too terrified to tell top executives the truth, your strategy is utterly useless. And finally, survival belongs to the adaptable, not just the strong. Nokia didn't die because they forgot how to make a good physical phone. They died because a culture lacking psychological safety and honesty will always be destroyed by competitors who can adapt faster. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Think about your own workplace, your own team right now. Does your organization truly value uncomfortable honesty, or do you silently reward comfortable lies? Because, as Nokia proved to the entire world, a comfortable lie might save your job today, but it will burn your entire platform to the ground tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. Keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one.